Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Celebrating Mothers campaign brought to you by the Vaishnava Ministry. Today, we have three very special guests with us here today. Her Grace Urmila Devidasi, Her Grace Campakalata Devidasi, and Her Grace Padma Gopi Devidasi. Thank you guys so much for being here today. For those of you who don't know, these three women are actually all related to each other. Mother Urmila is Champakalata's mom and Padma Gopi's grandmother. So we have three generations of Vaishnavis with us today. Thank you guys for being here. I think we should start with the invocation prayers when you're ready.
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharani Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskachade Shatarani Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Sam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lavita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Vanchikapati Visha Kripa Sindhave Pachapati Tanam Pavanevyo Vaishnave Benamo.
Jai. So I just want to introduce you guys to our guests, just so you kind of get an idea of who everyone is here today. So Her Grace Urmila Devidasi, Dr. Edith Best has served ISKCON continuously since her initiation by Srila Prabhupada in 1973. She and her husband are in the Vanaprastha order since 1996. They have 3 married children, 13 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandsons. She has a PhD in education and was a primary and secondary teacher for 27 years and has 19 years of experience with school management. Urmila is the chair of the Sastric Advisory Council to the GBC, was an associate editor of Back to Godhead for 30 years, and formerly a professor of sociology of religion at Bhakti Vedanta College. She travels worldwide teaching Krishna consciousness. She is the author of Krishna Meditations, Essence Seekers, Dr. Best Learn to Read, an 83 book literacy program, and the Great Mantra for Mystic Meditation. Her Grace Champakalata Devidasi, born in New York, 55th Street, Temple, raised in the ISKCON communities of Detroit, Michigan, and Hillsborough, North Carolina, educated in her mother Urmila's Gurukulas, and trained in the Bharatanatyam dance with Srimati Sudha Chandra Sekhar. Champaka has made sharing Krishna consciousness through Gurukula education and dance her life's mission. She is presently living under the shelter of Sri Sri Radha Golakananda and her Gurudev, His Holiness Bir Krishna Goswami, with her daughter Padma Gopi, her son-in-law Sri Arjuna, and 2 grandsons at the homeschool cooperative. And 2 grandsons at the New Goloka Temple in Hillsborough, North Carolina, where she manages 2 schools, BKG Academy and Homeschool Cooperative, and Padma Dance Academy, a Bharatanatyam dance school. Her joy in teaching comes from a heart connection with her students through sharing Krishna. Her teaching philosophy is about a melding of minds and hearts, developing loving relationships, respecting every student's individual aptitude, needs, and desires, and appreciating how everyone is very special to Krishna. Her Grace Padma Gopi Third generation Hare Krishna, 25-year-old Padma Gopi is a mother, a baker, a woodworker, and a nature lover. She grew up between North Carolina, Govardhan, and Hawaii. She now lives in North Carolina again with her family, where she loves to go out to ice cream and swimming and rollerblading. It's important to her to find the balance in everything in life and for everyone around her to feel comfortable and happy and loved. She's constantly working on learning how to improve herself and to find out new ways to be kind to herself and those around her. Thank you guys so much for being here today. It's such an honor to have you three. So I have some questions prepared today, and I'd like to hear just everyone's thoughts. So question number one, what are some of the key teachings from Srila Prabhupada that have served as a guiding force in your life as a mother?
Do you want to go first, Mata?
Well, Lauren, why don't you ask who you want to ask?
You can go first, Mother Urmila, and then we'll just go down the line, I guess, if that works for everyone.
Down the line of descendants.
Down the line of descendants. Key teachings of Srila Prabhupada that we're all individuals, that Krishna consciousness is a matter of awakening one's individuality, that Krishna consciousness should not be forced. It should be, he said, don't bring too many no's. And that the children should do what the elders are doing as far as possible. They should do things with the adults.
Okay.
I would say the basic principle that we're not our bodies has strongly influenced me as a mother and as a teacher, because if we're not these bodies, then there's no question of a hierarchical relationship that I'm somehow superior or better because I'm the mother or the teacher, but rather that we all have our eternal journeys as a spirit soul, and we just so happen to be brought together for the sake of helping one another and serving one another. So there's very much a sense of it's my service to take care of this child, and I can actually learn just as much, if not more, from them than they can learn from me. Just like yesterday we were reading in the Chaitanya Charitamrita where Lord Chaitanya asks Murari Gupta, is that right? Yeah. He says, who is the father, you or Raghunandan? Now, by their bodily relationship, Raghunandan was the son, but when Murari Gupta, or is it Mukunda Datta? Am I getting the names confused?
Mukunda Datta.
I'm getting the names confused. Yeah, Murari Gupta was the one who was the worshiper of Ram, right? Yeah, because he's in the same chapter, actually. Lord Chaitanya then, and that's actually another case of like individuality. Anyhow, so he asks Mukunda Datta, he says, who's the father, you or Raghunandan? And Mukunda Datta says, Raghunandan is the father. And Lord Chaitanya is very pleased with his answer. And the idea being that these souls are sent to us to be our teachers in the same way that, you know, perhaps we're meant to be theirs, but that there should never be a mood of superiority, that I'm somehow better than these children and they have to listen to me. But yeah, the Murari Gupta story is actually a story of individuality. Like my mother was saying, that everyone's an individual, because Lord Chaitanya tries to convince him to be attracted to Krishna instead of Ram, and he just can't do it. He's not able to do it. And he actually feels terrible because he feels like he's disobeying Lord Chaitanya, and Lord Chaitanya celebrates, actually. he's really happy that he retains his individuality. He says, actually, you're an incarnation of Hanuman, so of course you're loyal to Ram. But yeah, I think those two are the biggest influence for me, that individuality and that we're not these bodies.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I can't help but think, no wonder you're a little kid whisperer. Everybody just feels so comfortable just to be themselves around you because they know that you will just accept them for who they are, and find not only the good things about them, but make them feel like they're worthy of respect. I've always really been in awe at your instinctual ability to do that with everyone. And I know it drives you nuts that the kids are always following you around everywhere, saying, Mother Chapaka, Mother Chapaka, Mataji, Mataji. You, you've done it to yourself. They just feel so safe with you.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think the most Mother Champakas I got at one moment today were 5. I mean,
from five different kids all at once.
well, whenever it's a group setting, that's kind of natural thing. I mean, I try to encourage them to raise their hand quietly for group settings, but I especially notice it when there's like individual study time, when they're all, supposed to be doing their own study, and a student will say, Mother Champaka, I need help. And then so I'm helping them, I'm absorbed in what they're doing. And then it's like, Mother Champaka, Mother Champaka, Mother Champaka, Mother Champaka. And I'm like, I've got another teacher in this room to help me. Why is everyone calling my name? Anyway, it's hilarious.
I love it. How do you guys think, because since we're like on this topic of individuality, now I'm getting kind of like curious, like how do you guys think that like we can like find our own individuality while helping our children find their own individuality?
Actually, that's kind of in line with what I was going to say I appreciate about Srila Prabhupada's teachings. Um, I see a lot of people don't always talk about this, and this is something I actually really, really like my grandmother is doing right now with her book, Career Dharma. Nasinga, please stop kicking on the desk. It makes my chair move. Thank you. Is that we all have a place in the world, not just a place that's good for the world, but a place that's good for us, something where we feel like we fit and we feel good to be in that place. But for every person, it's different, it just both on a spiritual level and a material level. Um, we're all at a different progression on the spiritual level and on the material level. We're all completely unique in what we're attracted to and what we're attracted to doing with ourselves. And I really appreciate that Srila Prabhupada in his books, he actually really gets into the details, both about the spiritual and the material, about how to take care of ourselves and our basic needs and how to figure out who we are, both on a spiritual and material level. And as far as helping our children to find their individuality, you want to be in my lap too? Okay. Something my mother has told me, um, and we've talked about, is one of the best ways to help our children to learn something for themselves is to emulate it, and they'll see it and they'll want to copy it. So if your children see you taking care to pursue your own hopes and dreams, and please don't do that. To pursue your own hopes and dreams and goals and making time for yourself, making space for your desires, they will see, oh, so as I grow up, I should do that too. I should also figure out who I want to be and what I want to do and how I want to interact with the world, what my relationship with Krishna is. I think it's less about telling our children what they should do with themselves and more just figuring that out for ourselves openly in front of our children, and they'll learn, oh, I'm also supposed to figure things about myself. And so I guess that, from my opinion, answers both how to help our children learn individuality, and also what I appreciate about Srila Prabhupada is he helps us if we read his books and really try to learn, as he does tell us, Varnashram Dharma. Varna is all about how we figure out our place in the world, and ashram, what stage of life we're in, figuring out where we fit and what to do with ourselves while we're in that stage of life. It just makes it all make sense and makes it feel right and good to take care of yourself. Actually, that brings me to another thing I've appreciated. This isn't necessarily in his books anywhere, but I noticed in his conversations, he's talked about how health comes first, and then I think it's health, and then sadhana, and then family, and then like occupation or something. I don't know. Grandma or Mama, do one of you remember exactly? I know it's health and then sadhana for the first two, with a total of four. And I've always really understood and appreciated that you can't have good sadhana if your mental or physical health are falling apart. And like, yeah, you can try, but it won't be as effective. If you're only getting 2 hours of sleep a night, you're going to be falling asleep while you're chanting instead of actually having a real meaningful session of japa. That's just a crude example, but I really believe part of taking care of our health is understanding who we are, not just on a spiritual level, but on a material level too, because we're in these bodies, in this material world, in these material bodies. They have material needs, and part of those needs is feeling happy with ourselves, feeling happy with what we do with our life. And, whether that's occupation or hobbies or what, and I really appreciate that about Srila Prabhupada, is that he does talk about that. He helps us understand how to dovetail our interests into Krishna consciousness. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, that was so well said. Oh my gosh. Like, I especially love that point that you made about like just being an example for your child and like also just being like
That's all for my
authentic.
mom. It's funny you interviewing all three of us. I noticed one of the um, potential questions you said you might ask was, what have we gotten from our mothers and grandparents that we're passing on? And so maybe this is jumping ahead a little bit, but definitely that is one big one I've gotten from my mother. Sometimes I worry, how my kid's gonna figure this out and that out for themselves and for their lives. And it's like, oh yeah, my mother said I just have to emulate it in front of them, just live it myself, and they'll figure it out for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I love it, just kind of like reminds me that like there's no need to like be perfect. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. As a parent, I sometimes like worry about making mistakes, so to speak, but I feel like if we make those mistakes in front of our kids, like they can learn with us too. You know what I mean?
Especially if we're frank and open with them. But yeah, I completely agree. But like if we say, oh, hey, I just made a mistake. I'm still learning how to be a good parent to you. Sorry about that.
Well, I tell people all the time, as a soul, we are already perfect. It's not a question of becoming perfect. We're already perfect. But as a human being in Kali Yuga, we're extremely flawed, and we're probably going to make several mistakes every day. So it's just, you can be great, but if you're in an old car, the old car is going to do funny things. So, we're in a human body in Kali Yuga. We're extremely fallible. And yeah, like what Padma Gopi said, that transparency, not pretending to the children that we're perfect, and giving them a model for how we deal with our imperfections.
Yeah, that was a great point you made about like us being in a human body in Kali Yuga and that we're prone to flaws and mistakes, you know? I appreciate that. In what ways have you instilled spiritual values and practices in your children, and how have they responded to these teachings?
I'd actually like to say one more thing, and it actually does relate to what you just said, because I feel that this is a very important part of our spiritual journey, our life journey, but especially our spiritual journey, about mistakes. So we as the soul, my mother was saying, we're perfect, but what is perfection? Perfection is actually an eternal journey of growing and learning, which actually means that forever into eternity, we will make at least what appears to be mistakes. Now, if you are purely loving Krishna and by default all his parts and parcels, your mistakes are actually pure because they're part of your purity. And like Krishna himself, you know, we're reading Chaitanya Charitamrita in school, so it's on my mind. Lord Chaitanya is bidding farewell to all the Bengal devotees. They visited him for the 4 months of the rainy season. They're there for Rath Yatra in Jagannath Puri. He's a sannyasi living in Jagannath Puri. They're all going back to Bengal where his mother lives. And he actually gets very emotional when he asks them to take a message back to his mother. And he says, actually, I took sannyas in a state of madness. I shouldn't have done it. I made a mistake. I broke my mother's heart and I shouldn't have done that. So and it says that he actually becomes so emotional that for a moment it's like he can't control himself. Like he pulls himself back together so that he can keep talking. But what is he doing? He's feeling, and he's actually feeling this. He's not just saying it, that he's made a mistake. And I think it's very powerful, a very powerful message for ourselves and for our children, that perfection does not mean that you reach some kind of pinnacle of, I will never make any mistake ever again. It's just that we need to purify the mistakes, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, the motivation for the mistakes, the reason that we made the mistake needs to be purified. It needs to be based on pure love instead of selfishness. And as far as how do we instill devotional qualities or devotional practices in our children, I would say it's mostly by example, but also, you know, I keep referring to these stories. The stories from Shastra are hugely impactful. I mean, they're also examples, right? Examples of the Supreme Lord himself and of other Vaishnavas. And really those are the maps for how to live life. It's like, first of all, I want to be like my mother or like my father, right? I look at them as a person who's discovered how to live life. Or I want to be like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Mukunda Datta or Haridas Thakur, or, you know, all these different heroes we have either in our life right now or in Shastra. And then when we have those chosen heroes, then it's like, what would she do in this circumstance? What would he do in this circumstance? What would she say in this circumstance? What would he say in this circumstance? So it's really about example and stories, and those become the guiding lights for our lives and just naturally our children's lives. And I know my mother was about to say something and I kind of stole that, so sorry.
No, I think you already said, I think it's beautiful. Yeah. What were you asking again? I have to go back to the question. What was the question again?
The question was, in what ways have you instilled spiritual values and practices in your children, and how have they responded to these teachings?
Okay, well, I think something that Campakalata said about, you know, examples and stories, that was something that we did with all three of our children and our students. And then, you know, we trained them in a habit. I mean, Prabhupada was really, I'd say the instruction he gave about raising children, one of the most often was that they should rise early and attend Mangal Artik. It was like one of his most often repeated instructions. So that was something that we did with our kids and with the Gurukul students, you know, training them to get up early and go to Mangal Artik and bringing them, you know, in kirtan and in class. As I say, like Prabhupada said, having the children do what the adults are doing, and then engaging them in useful service according to their abilities and their natures and their propensities from a very young age. I mean, it was something that all of our kids, and we did this very naturally. We just included them in our various activities and allowed them to discover their own activities and their own nature. That, I mean, there's many, I could probably talk about this for about 5 hours, but I think that's sort of the basic thing.
Yeah, I just to like circle back around, like I love just like this whole idea of like just being the example for your child. I really appreciate that. And also what Mother Champak was saying earlier about like it's not about, not making mistakes. It's about purifying those mistakes. That's something I never thought about. And then also having the children do what the adults do, which kind of like ties into the whole point of example, which I really appreciate. And there was like an emphasis on letting it happen naturally instead of like being so forceful with the children. Padma Gopi, do you have anything to add?
I like to think that I am always ready to answer their every philosophical question, which turns out to be a lot. I remember as early as like 2.5 years old, I mean, when you getting really into asking me about just basic functionalities of the world, like what is the sun and will the sun ever go out? And uh, why does the sun go, to the other side of the planet every night? And being able to just tie these simple questions, not only with practical answers that we understand scientifically, but also understanding that it's Krishna's creation. Also, has asked questions about death and um, living entities like bugs and what happens to them when they die, and just always being ready to just talk about it, whatever comes up. And another thing that I really appreciate is how children are always desperate for stories. It's like a universal rule with every child is they love stories. And I have so much appreciation for the numerous child friendly, by child friendly, I mean that they're easy for children to understand, stories about Krishna and his various incarnations and his devotees and just all of their pastimes. And every single night they listen to these stories. And at a certain point, I've started feeling like they know these stories better than I do. But within each of these stories, there's always some life lesson they're learning, and it's directly to do with Krishna and his associates. And I just I really enjoy sharing these things with them. This is definitely another one of those things that's been passed on from my mother is I would ask her questions all the time about why this, why that, how this, and she would never just say, I don't know. She would really think about it and give me an answer, and the answer would pretty much always be based off of something philosophical. And it really helped me to feel like I had a good grip of understanding of how the world works, but through the lens of understanding we are not these bodies, where we go when we die, what our purpose is as living entities, as spirit souls, how we're supposed to focus our lives. And just this really felt like something that was instilled in me from a young age. And I'm definitely trying to just naturally encourage the same curiosities and interests in my children. And I mean, this also brings to dovetailing, at every age, there's always something we're interested in. And definitely children are interested in fantastical stories. And I love how we can dovetail that interest in philosophy and Krishna in a way that they love. I mean, they love their stories. Every single night they take turns choosing bedtime stories. And some of their most recent favorites have been The Adventures of Lord Ram, the story of when Daksha offends Lord Shiva, And let's see, what else have they, Krishna stealing butter. So all sorts of stories.
I just asked them, so I don't know if maybe I can get them to say it. I asked them, I said, so what can your parents do to encourage your enthusiasm to think about Krishna and serve Krishna? Are you guys willing to say it? We can hear from the fourth generation, because then we have 4 generations. What do you think? No? Okay, well, I'll just tell them what they told me. Nrsinga said we can sing songs about Krishna. They both agreed. That's why they had their thumbs up when you were talking about all the stories they hear, because they were agreeing with you. And Abhimanyu also strongly agreed that we should answer questions that they have. So they were both agreeing to that too. And then Abhimanyu said doing dramas. So we got to do dramas about Krishna with them. And you said something else too, Abhimanyu. What was it? I forget. He said, one of them said, who was it who said have kirtan every day with your children? Abhimanyu said that. He said do kirtan, both of them said do kirtan every day. Okay, so we had songs, stories, answer questions, do dramas, and kirtan. Was that right, guys?
And watching videos about Krishna.
Oh, I forgot that one. Watch videos about Krishna. Very important.
So they know a lot about him.
Highly recommend Vrinda Kishori stories for that one.
Yes.
She's awesome.
Perfect.
Kishori stories, yeah. Okay, so you got to hear from all 4 generations on that one.
Actually, I think you should just be interviewing Nrsinga and Abhimanyu. Forget about the rest of us.
Well, there you have it, parents. That's how you keep your kids inspired in Krishna consciousness. I love it. How have you maintained your own spiritual practice and personal growth while raising your children and pursuing your own goals, whether that's professionally, creatively, etc.?
Well, I guess for me, there was no question of not doing that. It never occurred to me ever to not do that. And I think that was just like a mindset that
I remember you telling me that when Murari, your oldest, was breastfeeding, he would need to be eating for so long that was when you would read the Srimad Bhagavatam. You would just sit there for 40 minutes straight reading.
yeah, I mean, just, and if I was doing house cleaning, then I would be listening to lectures, Prabhupada's lectures. And then we really took it seriously to go to the morning program at the temple, which meant we brought our kids, which meant that, I mean, until I became a Gurukul teacher, it meant that I got all my 16 rounds done in the morning of the temple program. I went to the class of the temple program. Once I became a Gurukul teacher, that wasn't possible anymore because I was having to give the children classes during the morning program. And so then it was more like 8 or 12 rounds in the morning, and having to finish the rest of my rounds later in the day. But I don't know. I just I never saw it as an or. I always saw it as an and. And I remember thinking, there's women from the beginning of time have done things that were their own interest and been their own persons, and at the same time raised their families. That's been the case in pretty much all the societies of the world. So I don't know. I think it really helped that I tend to be a very regulated person by nature, and we had a pretty regulated life. And so all 3 of my children ended up as babies being also very regulated without my having to do anything specifically with them to bring that about. So I see that many parents will complain their children are 3 years old and they'll still say, well, I'm not getting any sleep at night and my kids have an unregulated schedule. And they're kind of waiting for the children to become regulated, for them to be regulated. But what I see is that if we have a program, the children naturally fall into that rhythm and quite quickly as well. And that makes things much easier. Now, for some people who aren't very naturally organized and regulated, and there are a lot of people like that, then they're going to have a different system. What I'm saying for myself isn't going to work for people with a different psychology.
I feel like what you were saying kind of ties into like the whole idea of like being an example for your children, even in that aspect. And I feel like you kind of like, would you say that you kind of just made it a priority and that's why everything got done?
Yeah, that sounds very simple, but it really is that simple.
Yeah.
I was telling this to someone the other day that whatever are our priorities, we will do. We just will. I mean, not necessarily every single day. Some days life just overcomes us. But in general, just like when I was in graduate school, we were studying about school systems, they said, you could always tell what the priority of the school is by looking at their budget. Whatever people say, this is our priorities. What do they spend their money on? What do they spend their time on? What do they spend their energy on? We will do what we prioritize. We just will. Regardless of what we tell ourselves we believe, and regardless of what we tell other people we believe, and regardless of what we believe we believe. If you want to know what you really believe, look at what you do. How do you spend your time? How do you spend your money? It's a question. Yeah, again, that's not something people like to hear, and people think it's not the case, but it really is the case. So if I say, well, I have my dreams and my hopes and my goals and my personality, and there's things I want to do in this world for Krishna, and I want to do for my own self-development. And I also want to make sure that, I have that as a priority, and I also have as a priority, I really want to be there for my children. I want my children to know that I love them, that I care about them, that I care about their hopes and dreams, that I care about what they want to do for Krishna, that I care about what they want for their self-development, that's just as important as mine, and mine is just as important as theirs. They're both equally important. Then I'm going to put my time and energy, money, care, thought, desires into those two things, both for myself and for them. Now, again, at any particular moment, one may be taking priority. So, at 10:15 in the morning, I may be emphasizing something for my own development, and maybe at 10:30 in the morning, I'm emphasizing something for their development. They're not both necessarily running at, the same height in parallel constantly. And there's going to be some days when there's absolutely, no time for my personal hopes and dreams. It's all about my kids. And there's some days when it's someone else is watching my kids and I'm going to be doing something else. So, but overall, that's, if we really feel that those things are important, then we will be able to do them. Now, the only caveat would be people who are in some kind of horrific situation. I mean, there are people who are in the middle of, a war or something going on, some terrible abusive situation or war or calamity or extreme physical disability or illness, where the circumstances around us are so restricting and so impossible that it doesn't matter what we feel is important. We're not able, at least externally, to do them. So there is that caveat. It's not an absolute statement, but for people who, if we don't have those things operating in our lives, then it's certainly a fact that we will do what is important to us. Now, one of the ways that we make Krishna consciousness important, the most important way that Srila Prabhupada tells us, is hearing and association. You know, what Campakalata was saying about stories of sadhus is like that. So regularly hearing, you know, Padma Gopi was talking about having the kids listen to stories, and that regular hearing, it awakens our natural innate spiritual desires. That helps us to prioritize that which ought to be prioritized, helps us to prioritize that which will really make us happy and really make everyone else happy. And having good association as well, being around other people, you know, like there's studies that obesity is contagious and divorce is contagious and smoking is contagious. You know, if there's people in your life who are, you know, way overweight or who smoke or who are getting divorced, you're more likely to accept that as a norm. And the same way, if there's people in your life that are both prioritizing their children's personal and spiritual development and their own personal and spiritual development, then you're much more likely to do that as well.
Yeah, I would say that it's actually an essential part, like you were both saying, of setting an example for our children that we are our own individual people. That if we set the example that they're our world and we don't take care of any other aspect of life other than their care, then we're actually setting the precedent that they're supposed to sacrifice themselves in that way.
Mm.
And he wants to talk to me, so hold on. Oh, I did want to say one thing. Abhimanyu wanted to add one more thing that parents could do with their kids. He came in to tell me that they could read Bhagavatam with them every day.
So, Mother Champakalata, were you saying like that we need to integrate self-care into the mix?
Yeah, well, that's how I see the question that you asked, you know, how do we maintain our own sadhana, our own individual interests and pursuits? Certainly those can all be described as self-care. And yeah, part of the example that we're setting for them is how do you care for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And unless you care for yourself, you actually can't care for anybody else. You don't have it in you. You don't have the energy for it. So yeah, and I think, you know, my mother said this as well in the very beginning. She said, include them in your life. So, you know, let's say that your interest is teaching. I mean, you know, obviously my interest is in teaching. My mother is also a teacher. She included me in her interests. And so from a very young age, I was learning how to be a teacher. And I discovered at a very young age that I loved teaching. And I discovered at a very young age that I wasn't so sure if I wanted to give Bhagavatam classes. So when people ask me to do that, I'm like, not really my thing. Not that I'm not good at it, but it's just not what enthuses me. But I discovered that by being exposed to it, whether it was seeing her do it or trying it out for myself. You know, that's also how we discover our own individuality. We observe our parents expressing theirs and we join in with their expression of theirs, and we try it out and we try it on, so to speak. And I mean, like my daughter discovered at around age 11 that she didn't really want to be a Bharatanatyam dancer. Until then, she was really into it. But she's like, you know, that's not actually me. But she discovered that because she tried it, and she tried it because I was expressing that part of my individuality and I was being my own person with that. And sadhana is the same way. You know, they see by your example that it's important, and they also try it out by joining in with you. So I feel that that's very much part of taking care of them, and it's not in some way neglecting them. It's actually the opposite. It's very much part of caring for children.
May I expand on that a little bit? Just actually, this is straight out of your mouth, Mama. the whole situation that came up recently where it was brought up that if we let children not respect our needs and not respect us, not respect our boundaries, they will then believe just inherently, subconsciously, that no one needs to respect their needs and their boundaries. No one needs to respect them, that it really goes both ways. And I really believe that if we are consistent, that's one of the biggest things for me that I've learned about motherhood is whatever we want, we need to be consistent with it. We can't just one day say to our kids, I'm going to be doing this and you need to give me space when I'm doing it, but then only do it for a couple of days and then not do it for a week and then do it for a couple of days and then not do it for a month. They won't understand. They won't learn that they're supposed to respect it because you're not being consistent with what it is you want them to respect. So if you are only able to do your reading every day, the reading that you want to do when your children aren't talking to you, you can either wait till they're tucked in at night or not even that. I would say it is possible to do it while they're awake, but if you're consistent that you always do it while they're awake and while you're reading, you just say, I can't help you with that right now. You'll have to wait till I'm done reading. And you're just consistent with that. You'll probably have a couple of weeks of not having very focused reading because they'll be bugging you, but eventually they'll understand, oh, when my parents reading, they're not really available to me. Like, sure, I can go up to them and hug them, but I can't talk their ears off right now or beg them to go get me something. And it won't be a traumatizing thing. It'll just be a straightforward thing. Like if you need to use the restroom and you go to the only restroom in the house and the door's locked because someone's in it, you don't kick and scream and throw a tantrum. You just understand, no, I have to wait my turn. I think it's as simple as that with children, that if we're consistent and we have our own boundaries and say, hey, right now I'm doing this part of my sadhana. When I'm done, I can be there for you. Then they'll understand and they'll respect it. And you will see that they will then have their own things. They say, actually, mommy, right now I'm playing with this toy and you're asking me to go do this chore, but after I'm done playing with this toy. And then if you respect them having their need for whatever it is they're doing, they'll be more likely to respect you because it really goes both ways. And that's like the first thing that I was saying just now about boundaries, that if we tell them you don't need to respect my boundaries, they'll think that you don't need to respect theirs because it really goes both ways. And, this is also like what my mother was saying in answer to the first question is that we have individuality, that we're not better or lesser than anyone because of age or because of our familial connections. We are simply us. And so we need to respect our children just as much as we expect them to respect us. And I think that that in itself will help us with whatever amount of time we want to put into sadhana, whatever type of focus we want to put into it. And that, for ourselves, we will be able to fully successfully do it as long as there's consistent respect. And then also, like we've been talking about, our children will understand um, for themselves what they're interested in by watching us and observing us, and they'll find their own taste and their own flair. Definitely a big part of it is consistency. Like my grandmother was saying, you'll know what's really important to you based on what you actually do. It's not what you say, it's not what you make a declaration about. It's about what do you actually find yourself doing every day. And if you're consistent about that, your children will not only not get in the way, but they'll honor it and respect it. They'll appreciate it. They might even be proud of it. Oh yeah, my daddy does kirtan every day and I play the kartals with him. Or when he chants japa, he lets me play with toys in front of him and he makes funny faces at me every single time I'm playing with my toys. I'm actually just saying the kind of thing that I've seen happen with my husband and our sons. Um, my husband likes to do kirtans for our deities a lot. And especially Nrsinga gets really excited to dance in front of the deities, and then he goes and tells me, I just danced in front of the deities. They get excited about it. They want to get involved and they want to respect what we're doing.
Yeah,
What
that's
you're saying
really
about
beautiful.
consistency, I mean, one of the best pieces of advice I got, when our oldest son was an infant, was from another mother. And she was saying that consistency was absolutely the key. Now, I don't think it's possible for any human being to be 100% consistent 100% of the time. But as far as possible, like I've seen families where the parents change the rules several times a day. And the kids never know, what's expected of them or what they need to do. I was visiting a family once where their daughter was playing outside with a friend, and the mother calls, you need to come in now, and they don't do anything. And the friend asks the daughter, why aren't you going in? And she says, oh, my mother always lies. And it was just like, whoa, or I remember one time seeing a mother saying to her kid, if you do that again, you're going to have timeout. And he did it again. And she's like, if you do it again, you're going to have timeout. And he does it again. If you do it again, you're going to have timeout. I'm thinking, that is just not going to work.
And of course, he never actually gets a timeout, I
Of
guess.
course, he never gets a timeout. So to be consistent, there's so much research that inconsistency actually causes neurosis in people. If you have no idea what to expect, but if there's consistency about what you expect from yourself and others. And the other thing you said, Padma Gopi, I was thinking about how I trained all of my children that when I'm chanting my rounds in japa time, I was not going to be talking with them or playing with them. I had special toys that I brought out just for japa that they didn't see at other times in the day. And, they would play with those toys next to me. Of course, if they really needed me or something, they had to go to the bathroom or whatever, I was there for them. It wasn't like I was going to be in some kind of trance where I couldn't hear what they needed. But yeah, that was not my time to interact with them. And that then after japa, I could interact with them. And it was a question, being consistent. And that was just the way it was. And I found that my kids just respected that without, there really wasn't a question of not respecting it because it was just the way it was. I
find
consistently would not, interact with them at that time. And then I would interact with them later or before.
I find also that, especially as they get older, if you consistently take care of their basic wants and needs in a way that is reliable, that they feel safe with, that they know about at the same time every day, they'll have these reliable, regular meals, and they have their bathroom needs taken care of reliably, whatever age they're at. Obviously, when they get older, they take care of that themselves. Their showering and bathing taken care of. Basically, take care of their routine. That once that is an established, set, reliable thing, they're a lot less needy and mental. Like, if I try to do something for myself, whether it be sadhana or reading a book or I don't know, doing something on my computer, if I try to do that before their regular needs are taken care of, they sometimes can be sent into panic attacks. And I learned early on, don't do those things until I make sure that they're taken care of first. And once I became consistent with making sure they were taken care of first, then yeah, they leave me be. Sometimes they'll want to blab to me or play with me, and I'll say, not right now, and they'll just be okay because their basic needs are taken care of. And also, especially as they get older and they consistently have their basic needs taken care of, and they consistently see you needing your space and time, it just becomes a simple thing. Like, it's really hard when you first initiate it. I specifically remember for their sleeping routines when they were breastfeeding, I co-slept with them, but as they got old enough to not need to breastfeed at night, I worked on night weaning, and both of my sons have very different personalities. but it was hard for both of them to do night weaning, but especially with my older son. Um, it ended up being months of every single night I would have to dedicate at least 2 hours just to tucking him in. But I was so just determined to a point of stubbornness that I would not give up at getting him to peacefully be in his own bed. Um, but it meant I would have to do all sorts of techniques of gently getting him to ease off of being so dependent on me constantly being with him. And yeah, it literally took like half a year to go from being stuck with him as soon as it was time for him to go to sleep at night and just being stuck hours. Like there went the rest of my day. 2, 3 hours of just laying there in bed while I was his human pacifier. If I tried to go away, he would scream and wake up, and that was it. So once it was time for him to go to bed, I would just be stuck. And honestly, it was kind of hellish towards the end of his nighttime breastfeeding. Um, and going from that to him being able to just put himself to sleep in his own bed really did take like half a year. And during that time, it was hard, like really hard. I think I went from, instead of breastfeeding him for 2 hours and him being the nighttime pacifier, just holding him while he screamed and saying, no, Milky's not available at nighttime anymore. The sun's gone down, Milky's gone. It's all gone. And for, it was like 2 weeks straight, he would scream himself to sleep over the course of 2 to 4 hours. And after about 2 weeks, that calmed down and he was happy just to be cuddled to sleep. But then it still, it would take like 2 hours for him to fall asleep. And even then, I wouldn't be able to walk away because just me moving would like wake him up.
Mhm.
And this was also having him go from my bed to his own bed. And eventually it was um, singing him to sleep. And then eventually it was playing a story with him to sleep. But I still had to be there and like hugging him and holding him. And eventually it was a story play helping him listen to like a recording story while I just held his hand, and then eventually just while I sat next to him, and every single time like I purposely pushed it a little farther every time, and finally I was able to just turn on his nighttime story and say goodnight and walk out. And that's not what I do. And it was months and months of hard work of training him to put himself to sleep and not be so needy for my constant presence, but it's paid off. He and I've now had years and years of being able to sleep through the whole night. I've got a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old because I put that effort in. Yes, it took months for the first one. For my younger son, it was a little faster. He tends to roll with the punches of life a little better. Whereas it took Abhimanyu 2 weeks of screaming to stop breastfeeding at night. It took Nursinga 2 days of whimpering for 20 minutes. So yeah, Abhimanyu, it was 2 weeks of screaming for 2 to 4 hours. And Nursinga, it was 2 days of whimpering for 20 minutes. And after that, he was fine. He just didn't need to breastfeed at night anymore. Anyway, my point is that with any sort of routine, including our routine of sadhana, when they are first getting accustomed to some things in life, it can be hard, but the consistency where you don't give up, it can sometimes feel like it's going to go on forever. And it really did feel like that way with my older son, getting him used to sleeping, that it was just going to go on forever, that I would never be able to have my evenings to myself, that I would never be able to just tuck him in and walk away, that he would also wake up through the night screaming for where I was. One of his coping techniques was he had these non-leaking sippy cups filled with water. So at one point, he had to have three at a time in his bed with him, and he'd fall asleep hugging them. But if he woke up to find that he had dropped them, he would start screaming because he had dropped his water bottles. And so I'd have to get up and go out of my bed and walk over to him and help him find his water bottles. That was torture. But I stayed consistent that I was going to continue to wean him off of all of his crutches for going to sleep. And he doesn't need water bottles in his bed anymore. Like that was years ago. And I have my independence at night. I basically have 12 hours straight from when I tuck him into when he wakes up of just completely I can do my own thing. And yeah, that was all just consistency, and it was hard, but it was important to me. And so in the same way with sadhana, if it's important to you to be able to have your focused sadhana with your kids around, you be consistent. You put, make clear what your expectations, what your needs, what your boundaries are. You make sure their basic needs are taken care of, and you just do it every day. And sometimes it's going to seem hard and impossible, but it's, you know, just consistency. It could take months, could take a couple weeks, depends on your kids. I mean, if you do it from when they're newborns, they'll just grow up being used to it. But I mean, I didn't figure out that I even could put my older son in a bedtime routine until he was 18 months old. My younger son, I put him on a bedtime routine when he was just a couple months old. I mean, before that, he was sleeping almost all day, as newborns do. But, as he started actually sleeping only at night versus day, yeah, I figured that out. So, it's never too late, no matter what age they are. But as long as once you start, you don't stop.
Your story about your eldest son, Abhimanyu, gave me hope in life because right now, no, seriously, right now I'm still breastfeeding my son, and so I could relate when you said that you were like a human pacifier, like, and then just hearing like the progression of the story that there's hope and consistency will give you that independence, like, uh, I feel a little relieved right now. Thank you.
Good luck. You'll get there. It's not forever. He's not going to be a 20-year-old still breastfeeding.
Oh
Of course,
gosh.
we've got stories of Lord Chaitanya and his associates drinking breast milk, but I think that's a very unique situation.
I feel like what Padma Gopi was saying kind of ties into my next question. What are some of the most challenging moments you've faced as a mother, and how have you navigated through those moments?
Well, I'll just say how I navigated. I don't think I want to talk about what are the most challenging moments, but I think navigation is faith in Krishna, faith that there's a God, there's a loving God. He knows what's going on. He's there for me. And sometimes in the particular moment, it's chaos. But in the long run, we know that we have shelter.
I'd say the biggest challenge for me as a mother, which is still very prevalent, and I think is just as soon as you're a parent, or I mean, frankly, I'm experiencing this as a teacher as well. I'd say the biggest challenge is being aware that your child is suffering and not being able to stop them from suffering, or that they have suffered and you weren't able to protect them. And, wherever that suffering may come from isn't really the point, but I think that need, that drive that we feel as mothers to spare, them from any kind of harm is so intense that if we see that they're being harmed in some way or suffering in some way, it's just, you feel so helpless, you feel like a failure. You question everything, like all your choices in life that might have somehow, facilitated their suffering. And yeah, I think what my mother said is really the solution, that it comes down to we're not actually the controllers. All we can ever do in any given moment is the best that we can do given what we know and what we're capable of. And ultimately, we have to trust that Krishna carries what we lack. And we also have to accept that our children have their own journey. It's not really our journey. Maybe we can serve them and facilitate them on their journeys, but ultimately their journey is their own. And when it comes to any kind of experience, but especially obviously a painful experience, it's not really so much about the experience, but how do we respond to it? And we can give them all the tools to respond in a favorable, healthy, wholesome way to some kind of traumatic or painful experience. We can set an example in our own life for how we respond, but ultimately, they're the ones who need to make the healthy choices. And so there has to be some amount of detachment. So, there's a sense of heavy responsibility, but that has to be mixed with some detachment also.
I have one final question. What are the factors that influence a child?
I mean, that's huge.
Okay,
That's just such a huge question. Obviously, parents, siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, the family, the extended family, friends.
I think it could be summed up in as simple as nature versus nurture, because it's such a broad question. Nature versus
Yeah.
nurture is a broad answer. It's both their nature, who they are, and their nurture, what they experience, what they see. And I think that is one of those things in life. You can never know how much of one or the other is influencing what's going on. I think for everyone it's different. For some people, their nature is more of an influence than their nurture, and vice versa. And I think the best that we can do is to try to give them the best nurture that's through their environment and the people around them and what they hear and learn and see. And as far as their nature, we can help them to understand themselves and how to dovetail their nature in healthy ways. So I guess that's my broad opinion on the broad question.
That you summed it up right perfectly.
I actually had something to say about the experience, what it's like to be a mother who struggles with something or other with your children. Um, I have a very different answer from both my mother and grandmother. They both talked about feeling out of control and witnessing the suffering of your children. I, for myself, in a way, I kind of have an opposite answer. My own difficulties so far have only been with a 4 and 6 year old, and obviously the years that came before that, not with adult children. And I'm also not a teacher, so I don't have exposure to the sufferings of so many students. For me, myself, my main struggles have been entirely coming from myself and feeling where I have to be more careful about myself and being more in control of myself. I have the most difficult times for me were when I felt myself being taken over by anger with my children because they had behaved in some obnoxious way that felt insulting or disrespectful with me. And that I would say would is the biggest lesson I've had to learn as a mother is how to take a step back and cool myself off before reacting, and also being more kind to myself if I do react a little more loudly than I should have. And that's been my biggest struggle. However, it's gotten a lot better since I've been being more kind to myself and been focusing on not only controlling my anger, but breathing through it and just allowing myself to take a step back. Where if my children say or do something obnoxious, instead of blowing up at them, just taking a moment to control my anger and then just walking out, and they can blow up by themselves and they can be obnoxious to themselves. And um, I think I've been a lot healthier of a mother, and I've had a lot healthier relationship with my children over this past year that I've been practicing that, of just taking a deep breath and understanding that if I reflect back at them what I see them throwing at me, it's just not going to turn pretty. And I have to be the better person because I'm their mom. I'm not supposed to wrestle in the mud with them when they're obnoxiousness, because children can be. They don't understand the line between so many things in life. They're very self-centered, and it's natural for them to be. They're figuring out where they are in the world and where they fit, and they're always pushing buttons just to see how much they can, to see how they're supposed to behave and react. But if sometimes if you picture your children as in the body of an adult but acting the same way, it's like, okay, that person would be locked up, because they're acting pretty awfully. Like that's not cool. And it's hard because they are people. Just because they're in tiny bodies doesn't mean the way that they're acting doesn't hurt, and it does. And if an adult were to act that way with us, we wouldn't, if we were being intelligent, we wouldn't hang around them when they're being like that. We would just say, "Whoa, dude, you need to chill," and we back off. And so yeah, that's been my biggest lesson, is I need to do that with my own children. And I'm really glad that I've been doing that. It's been good for me and for them.
Yeah,
Thank you.
actually, right after I answered that question, I was thinking exactly what you said, that worse than knowing that your child is suffering due to something outside of your control is seeing that they might be suffering, or they are suffering because of a mistake I made.
Yeah, and then
Something
you
that
just
I did
hate
have
yourself and
control.
think you're the
Yeah,
worst mother in the world, and it
yeah, exactly.
sucks.
That's pretty darn painful and difficult. Yeah, so I really appreciate that you brought that up.
Thank you guys so much for being here today. I feel like there were so many nuggets of wisdom just sprinkled throughout this discussion. I'm just so grateful. Thank you guys so much. And thank you everyone for watching today. Please let us know your thoughts in the comment section. I'd love to hear them. Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you
This
so
was
much for
really
having us.
enlivening for me too. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.